This is an M6, M10, M14, M16, and M24. Today I am going to do a quick video to talk about fork preload bolts and stem caps. These have a lot of different names. These are, obviously here's your stem, and this is called a stem cap. Some people call it a fork cap. And then the bolts have different names. This is usually called like a fork preload bolt. Some people call them stem bolts, which isn't really the right term because the stem actually has different kind of bolts. So these fork preload bolts, here's a fork here. These fork preload bolts are what compresses the bearings down and partially holds the fork on. These two pinch bolts here hold the stem to the fork steer tube primarily, but the fork preload bolt that goes on top also helps secure it, and it also helps compress the bearings down because you'll have your bottom bearing, your top bearing, your spacers, and all that good stuff. And the fork preload bolt will compress it to the right point. So ideally you want just a tiny bit of space between the top of the steer tube and this part of the stem right here. So about like that. I know my camera's not really focusing, but I'm not showing you how to do that today. That's a separate video. I'm going to show you a couple different kinds of these. So this is obviously a star nut, and these come in different sizes. So the fork steer tube, this is a 1 1/8, and sometimes these come in 1 inch. So if you need to put a star nut in here, normally you would get a 1 1/8 star nut, which is this one here. But they make smaller ones, like this one right here. M6. This is for a 1 inch steer tube, and this is for a 1 1/8 steer tube. Now this is a star nut right here. This is the star nut that goes down in the fork. Let me show you that one more time. I didn't really talk about it. So this fork here is really unique because it has an M14 threading right here. An M14 threading, which was for this fork bolt here, which is stripped. This is M14, which is an odd size. And I couldn't find a replacement for this. So I pounded a star nut in there backwards from the bottom, which is a standard M6 size for a star nut. So I'm going to probably have to get a longer bolt, but I'm not sure about that yet. So this is a threadless fork because there's no threads on the outside, which sometimes confuses people that have forks that have threading on the inside, like this Kink bike over here that I'm going to show you in just a little bit. So you can see here an example of a fork that has threading for the stem bolt, the stem cap fork preload bolt, and there's a star nut in there. And I have another example here. I have this all taped up. This is a fork here that has a star nut in it. That's where the star nut should normally be, just right below the top of the steer tube. And that is not an M6 threading, that's an M10 threading, which I'll get to in just a little bit. And while I'm here, I wanted to show you one other thing. This fork here has an integrated race. You see that bevel there? So the bearing can fit right on there, the bottom bearing. This fork here does not have an integrated race, so you have to put a race. So if you buy a headset, you'll get this little piece in the bottom, usually, and you just have to slide it on. And then sometimes you need a tool to get these on. This one has a nice little gap here, so it's really easy to put these on. And despite what you might think, it's really locked on there. It's really solid. Anyway, that was just a side note. It's not really the point of this video. In this video, I want to show you all these ridiculous options we have for BMX bikes. All right, so first of all, I want to say that this is the most common nowadays, and I decided to take this opportunity to do an unboxing. This is a Kink fork preload bolt. This is M24, so this is 24 millimeters in diameter. They call it a fork cap bolt. Yeah, some people call it a stem cap, a fork cap, fork bolt, or a fork preload bolt. Comes with a sticker. Now this is a very, very nice fork preload bolt because, well, for one, it's nice and thick. This is going to be very secure in your fork rather than this dinky little 6 millimeter bolt. But this is really nice because you can use a 6 millimeter Allen key or a 3/8 driver. Fits right in there. I'm not going to push down because I'm not ready to install this. But this is nice because you can just pop in a socket in there, a 3/8 socket wrench, and just have tons of leverage like that. Okay, so this is what most modern BMX bikes have with a decent fork on it. I shouldn't say decent because some forks, like this one that I showed you, this came off of Fairdale. This fork, they make good stuff. And they're still using starnuts, but I don't think this is as secure as what most 20-inch BMX bikes are doing, like this. Now let me show you some craziness with all these options we've had throughout the years, and we still have. So like I said, a normal starnut is M6. These came from Pork Chop BMX, by the way. They're awesome at their packaging. They label everything for you. So you might be thinking, what's the difference between M6 and M10? Well, this is an M6 here. A normal starnut is going to be M6. This is the stem cap. So this goes down into the fork this way, by the way. It's designed to go down in. Do you see how these bend upwards? But then when you put pressure on it to compress, it won't come back up because these little prongs get stuck on the inside of the steerer tube. So this is an M6. You can see obviously it's not hollow, it's too small. This is an M10 bolt. And it's hollow, so you can run a brake cable through there, if you have a front brake. So this is M10 versus M6. So obviously if you have an M10, you're going to need a different stem cap. And that's what this is here. You see how this stem cap has a bigger hole? So this is an M6 cap, and this is an M10 cap. You can see how it's bigger for this bolt. Okay, so I'll just line these up. This is M6, M10. This one here is M14. This came off a DK bike, an older DK bike. This is Sunday's fork preload bolt, and this is M16, and this one's M24. Okay, now how ridiculous is that? That they're still doing this kind of stuff in 2022. It's just crazy. This is an M6, M10, M14, M16, and M24. So I talked about the differences in diameters. This is for a 1-inch steer tube. This is for a 1 1/8 inch steer tube. And I didn't know this before. I might as well tell you, in case you're working on old bikes like I do sometimes. This is a 1 1/8 inch steer tube, but it's so thick that I had to buy a star nut designed for a 1-inch steer tube. Because the inside, this thing is heavy, man. This thing is beefy. This came off a DK bike, an old DK. It kind of looked like a dirt jumper, but it had gears on it. It was a really strange bike. But you can see in a more modern fork like this one, how much thinner, see how much thinner that steer tube is? Okay, so I talked about the crown race and integrated, non-integrated, 1-inch, 1/8, threaded, non-threaded. I talked about all the different sizes and the different kinds of stem caps. Oh, I wanted to mention this real quick. I got this star nut package right here. It's just a black one. And these come in different sizes also. You can see here, this is 25.4. And this was too small for my stem. Watch this. See, it just fell right through. So I got this, I meant to show the packaging for this. I just got this off Amazon. If you want to know the brand. This was like $7 or $8. So I got this one, and it fits perfectly in there. It looks real nice too. And the M6 bolt on this one is tapered to fit perfectly in this stem cap. So this is what's going to be going on my next bike if this bolt is long enough. I'm not sure that it's going to be long enough. I actually went to the hardware store and I got some longer bolts. These are M6 bolts. But the longest one they had with that recessed, you can see this one's longer. So this one is, I think, 45 millimeters, and this one's like 50 or 55. This was like $1.25, and this was like $1.75. So this bolt is a tiny bit longer than this one over here. Hopefully I don't have to mix and match the silver, but I really don't care. I didn't want to run into any surprises when I'm building my bike, so I just went and got a couple extra sizes. And I'll probably use those sometime in the future anyway. Okay, so I think I explained everything on here, and now I wanted to show you a more modern fork over here. This is a Kink Drifter. It's a 26-inch BMX bike. This is a 6 millimeter. This is a fork preload bolt. And I have not loosened this up, so I'm going to show you what it looks like inside of there with a nice fork, nice BMX fork. Dang, that was really on there. Okay, you don't need to over tighten those, by the way. Okay. You can see this one's a little bit smaller than the other one that I bought. You can see the grease on there. So when you look down in there, let me see how close I can get here. That is the fork steerer tube that you can see the top of right there. You can see how it's threaded on the inside. It's still a threadless fork, because that's talking about the outside, but the inside of the fork steerer tube has threading for this M24 bolt right here. Whoop, just got grease on my handlebars. So I'm going to put this back in. I also wanted to show this a headset. This lets you run a brake line through your forks for a front brake. And this star nut is bigger than a standard star nut. I'm going to show you two of them side by side right now. So here's a standard star nut and a standard 6mm bolt. This is the headset, obviously the bigger one. And when you screw this, when you set this in your fork and then you screw this compression bolt in, you can see it's hollow. You can run a brake cable through there. They call it a POTS mod when you run your front brake cable through the fork like that. I almost forgot, I wanted to show you the difference between these bolts. So this Fairdale fork has a traditional star nut. You just knock those in there. Sometimes they're welded in there. This Sunday fork has a preload bolt, but this is the Sunday preload bolt. So some people call these stem bolts or stem caps, fork bolts. So you can see the difference there. And this one is M16. This one right here is really hard to find. It's like proprietary. You can't, only Sunday makes these. You can't find those. And I showed this in my last video, but I'm gonna show you a couple other options that I've come across that are very hard to find nowadays. So this is a normal 6mm star nut. This is what most headsets will come with. Headsets like these, by the way, like press-in headsets. So you can see this is a 6mm and this is a 10mm. The 10mm allows you to have an empty, hollow bolt. Anyway, I came across some additional 10mm options. This is from a company called like Tree, I can't remember, Tree something. They make BMX components, but their website is really scarce, so I don't think they're still making stuff, and if they are, it's not very much. But I got this from Empire BMX in Austin, and then this is an S&M one. Fit also used to make one. A bunch of companies used to make them. And nowadays they use like a 24mm one, so it's much bigger threads. These are hard to find. Empire still sells these, and I found a BMX shop in Tucson that had some of these, but even S&M didn't have these on their website. They still show them, but it says sold out. So anyway, personally, I think the 10mm bolt is beefier and more secure than a 6mm. So let's look at a couple of these. So the 6mm, the bolt goes into a cap, and you can see, here's another cap. So the bolt goes into a cap. These 10mm ones I found, it's just all one piece, which is kind of cool if you like that look. I mean, it's just, that's really subjective, so. But anyway, here's another 6mm. So, you know, These work just fine. I mean, they use these on mountain bikes forever. I think a lot of mountain bikes still use these. So if you can imagine the abuse that a mountain bike takes to just, for the fork to be just held on basically by this 1 6mm bolt. Now the stem also has pinch bolts on the side, but this is the preload bolt because it keeps the fork together this way so the bearings compress into place properly. But if you can imagine this is what's holding your fork together, and then you have this option, to me, this is more sturdy. So this is a normal 6mm bolt that goes into a star nut, and this is a 10mm, so you need a special star nut for this 10mm. It says fit on it. I have some more over there, some different ones over there. I also wanted to show differences between these. This is the fork preload bolt. You see how small this one is? I don't know what the millimeter size on this is, but I'm guessing that's like a 10 or a 12. Actually, it's a little bigger than 10, I think. It's a 12. This one here, look at this nice. So these ones here suck because, first of all, they use cheap aluminum. It's real soft. And you see how it got stripped out. It just has one Allen key on there. This is the good stuff here. This is a Kink fork preload bolt, probably 24. But look at that. You have two options in there. You have an Allen key way down in there deep, or you can just put a socket on there. So this will never get stripped out. So